Just realized I'd forgotten to start the stream there. So when you're starting an extruded roof, you're starting from a grid line, the face of a wall, or a reference plane. So on the Architecture tab, if you find the Reference Plane tool, what a reference plane is, it's kind of like a construction grid line. It's a point of reference in the project. It doesn't show up in your drawings when you print them, but reference planes do show up in your views. So there is a reference plane right there, and it is a dashed green line that appears in your plans, your elevations, and your sections. Now after you've placed a reference plane, when you select it, you can see that there is a means by which you can name this reference plane. And you should name this reference plane if you're going to use it as a starting point for an extruded roof. So we're going to show you how you can use either the face of a wall, a grid line, or a named reference plane to start an extruded roof. Now, if you're extruding from, if you're creating an extruded roof, you need to be looking at the plane perpendicularly. So if if we're looking at our house here, if I want to create an extruded roof, I need to be looking perpendicularly at that reference plane. So there it is there. So I need to be in my east elevation. Okay, so there's the east elevation. I don't know why it's that one level is all messed out like that. We kind of talked about that earlier, didn't we, about how sometimes these things can get out of whack. So here I'm holding my left mouse button down while I'm using the scroll mouse to zoom out. Okay. Now remember, I had created that reference plane along that eastern edge of the wall, and now, just right by in the notes there, top of page 7, it says to use the set work plane command, which is on the Architecture tab, and you've got a few options here. So this is the set work plane command. This is telling Revit where you want to start the extruded roof from. If you choose pick a plane, you can simply pick the face of that wall and have the extruded roof start from that plane. Now, if you name a reference plane, it shows up in the list. If you've drawn some other reference planes in the project, they won't show up in this list unless they are named. So now here's how it works. That's now our work plane. So my extruded roof is going to start from the face of that reference plane. So from the roof drop down on the Architecture tab, we're going to use the roof by extrusion. And if you look carefully at the command, you can see there is a blue line along the top edge of the roof. Now with a footprint roof, we draw the plan outline of the roof. With an extruded roof, we draw the top edge of the roof. The next thing that Revit asks is which story is the extruded roof to be associated with. So here, if we associate it with our roof level, if the roof level were ever to move up and down, the extruded roof would move with it. So that's why Revit is asking, what level this extruded roof is to be associated with. So we hit OK, and I'll just use a curve. So that pink line that I draw represents the top edge of the roof. And that's all you have to draw, top edge of the roof. So when I finish, you get a roof. And if we look at what Revit has done in 3D, it draws that roof from that reference plane all the way over to the outside edge of that wall. So there's our extruded roof. And you folks can see that there are triangles that allow you to stretch that extruded roof farther. Now, what if I wanted to define a 2-foot overhang on all sides for this thing? Well, first of all, let's go back to our east elevation view. There's our extruded roof. What if I wanted to make it a 2-foot overhang from the wall here, just like this footprint roof? So if you double click your extruded roof in elevation, you'll see that arc again. And I can run a dimension. So there's our dimension command. And I'll run it from the wall out to the edge of this dot. So we're not quite at 2 feet yet. So how can I make sure that this is 2 feet? If I click on the pink line here, you can see that the value of the dimension becomes editable, and I can put in for a 2-foot overhang. But wait a second, it actually just moved the whole line. Did you see that? I don't want Revit to move the whole line. I want Revit to extend this arc so that I get to 2 feet. Now I can try and drag it right to 2 feet, and I might get lucky, and I might not. So if you're looking for a way to do that more precisely, what you can do is you can draw a little construction line along the outside of your wall. So there's that line right at the edge of the wall, and then I'll just use the move command and move it out 2 feet. So that little pink line now, I can just extend it straight up, like so, and use that as a guide to bring my and I do the same thing on the other side. So in that direction, you can see how we could get it sorted. Draw a little line here, up, copy it over, or just use the move command and move it over 2 feet, and extend this up as a guide, and then just pull this back. So that's 2-foot overhangs on either side. But now the question is, how do you deal with it in the other directions? Now don't worry if you don't quite get it now. You'll see it on YouTube anyway. So how do I get these other overhangs here sorted? Well, we can now look at an elevation looking at the side of this footprint roof. So instead of looking in the east elevation, if we look in the south elevation, there we go. So now what I can do is I can run dimensions again from the walls out to the edge of the roof, and I'll do this on both sides. Again, just using the dimension command, holding it over the edge of the wall, and you can see that dashed blue line. So Revit is telling you that's the first reference for the dimension. So if you click, that dimension is propagated perpendicularly from that first line of reference. So now to get that 2-foot overhang, or 1'6" or whatever we were doing. So I'm just hitting escape twice to get out of the dimension command. Put your cursor on the edge of the roof object, and when you tap the tab key, so there's 1 tap, 2 taps, 3 taps. So obviously just by putting my cursor here and hitting the tab key once, I'm picking that edge of the extruded roof. And now if I click it, you can see that the dimension becomes editable. And I can reach in here and go for 2 feet. Do the same on the other side. Hover right on the edge, tab key once, left click. And so that's how we got the 2-foot overhang with our roof. So that allows you to have control over those extruded roof edges. So that's kind of the quick introduction to how these extruded roofs work. Now, as I mentioned earlier, when Revit was creating the extruded roof, it asked which level I want this extruded roof to be associated with. And you'll notice that when I select it now, there's a reference level feature of these extruded roofs, so I can associate it with maybe a different level in the project. And why this is important is that if my roof height changes, you can see that both of those roofs move up together. Now, if my extruded roof was associated with the second floor, it's going to ignore any changes in height of the roof level. So if my roof level goes up, that extruded roof isn't caring because it's associated with level 2. So that's just the little bit of understanding of what's happening there. Okay, now another tool that's associated with roofs is the opening tool. Now I'm going to go into 3D for this. So I'm going to select my extruded roof now, and folks, have a look up on the ribbon. You're going to see the vertical opening tool. It's this one right here. Vertical opening. So this allows you to cut a hole through a roof, maybe for a chimney, or maybe to change the outside shape of the roof. Now in 3D here, there's nothing to see. So you're not going to want to use the vertical opening tool in 3D. You'll want to use it in plan. So there's my extruded roof, I think. No, it's not. It's this one here. That's my extruded roof. Now again, the reason that this roof plan isn't showing properly is because of view range. So here you can see how my footprint roof is being truncated. I need to go into my my view range for my roof. And you can see it's still set at 4 feet, the default setting for a plan view, and I'll just make it high enough so that my cut plane and the top are high enough that I'm not going to be looking and cutting through my roof anymore. So there's my extruded roof. So when you select your extruded roof and plan, there's the vertical opening tool, and now you can see a series of dashed green lines around the edges. That represents the edge of this roof. So if I wanted to put a hole in it for a chimney, I can draw a sketch line in there, and it will cut a hole through an extruded roof. So there's that hole. Now if you look on the notes here, what we're kind of doing is using negative space in the cutout to leave a central area intact. Now once you have used the vertical opening tool, when you go back to the vertical opening tool again, Revit will show you areas that you have already done. But let's talk about that sketch in the bottom left-hand side of page 7. So in that case there's a rectangle that's been drawn on the outside. And I'll more or less do the shape that you see in the notes. Now, don't forget that these dashed green lines that you see around the edge of the extruded roof represent its original plan outline. So that's the greatest extent of that extruded roof. Now using the vertical opening tool, I've got this extra rectangle on the outside, and what I'm going to try and do is keep my other lines that are going to define the area that I'm cutting away from my extruded roof. They're going to be inside these green sketch lines. So page 7, bottom left-hand corner. So what's going on here, folks, is that these two sets of lines, the rectangle on the outside and these set of curves on the inside, in between them is the area that's cutting away at the extruded roof. So when I finish, this is what the result. Now let's look at this in 3D. Can you understand what's happening there? So it's a negative cut. It leaves the positive portion in the middle. So when I click on that extruded roof again here, let me just turn on shading so it's a little easier to see. Okay, so there's my extruded roof. So the trick was drawing that extra box on the outside leaves the bit on the inside as the part that's retained. So if I hadn't drawn that box on the outside, so here if I delete it, what it does is it cuts a hole in the middle, so you get that effect instead. So by leaving that outer box on the outside, we're only carving away this zone and leaving the part in the middle retained. So that's just a little trick with the vertical opening tool. Now that kind of a shape isn't something that you might draw that often. If your folks are doing more residential style roofs, let's talk about a more common configuration of a extruded roof. Now if you folks want to flip over to page 8, we'll talk about that next. Join roofs tool. Now what we're going to do in this case is we're going to do a extruded roof, and I'm going to do it in 3D this time. So I'm going to spin this model around to the front here where our main entrance is, and I'm going to put an extruded roof that's associated with this wall face. Okay, so I'm using roof by extrusion. So Revit wants to know which plane this extruded roof is starting from. So I'll use pick a plane. And now you move your cursor over the face of the wall where you want that extruded roof to start from. So now I'm saying start from this wall face. Then Revit asks which story do I want the extruded roof associated with, and I'll just say the roof. Now even though we're in 3D, we can still get an orthographic view of the model just by clicking one of the faces of the view cube. So now I'm looking at the front of my house straight on. Now alternatively I could go to the south elevation as well. That would be fine as well. So what I'm going to do here is just draw a little arc, little round roof like so, just with a little bit of curvature on it. So that line again represents the top edge of the roof. So this little curve, and I'll finish. So what happens is Revit extends that roof and pushes it right through out to the back wall. And it's just something that Revit does automatically. It just extends that roof out like so, right out to the back wall. Now obviously that's not the intent. What we want Revit to do instead, so you can see I've gone to 3D and I've selected my extruded roof, and you can see that when you select an extruded roof you get these controls at either end, and I'm going to grab that back triangle and I'm going to pull it back, like so. So our extruded roof is just kind of sitting outside of the main roof. So when you're doing these, basically a dormer style roof, quite often you will use the roof join tool. So I showed you earlier how we did that when we had a gable end roof that we needed to tuck back underneath the gable behind. So I'll use that tool here now to pick the edge of our curved dormer. So I click the edge first, and then I click the roof that I want it joined to. So you can see how that curved dormer is now attached back to the main roof. Now one tool that you may be interested in, I'm not going to go over right now, it's on the architecture tab. It is the dormer tool. So this will cut a hole through the roof, just like you see there, based on picking a dormer roof, just like I've drawn, and the 3 walls that are at the front of the dormer. Okay, let's talk about gutters and fascias. Now, with most wood frame constructed roofs, you will have fascias and gutters. There is a drop-down menu on the roof tool, so you can add these pieces in. So here's the the fascia tool right here. So I would recommend that when you're putting these fascia on, do it in 3D so you can really see what's going on. Okay, here's how the fascia tool works. Once it's active, put your cursor on the top edge of the fascia, and Revit will place the fascia on that edge. With the command still operating, pick on the next roof edge and the next. Now, if I want to work on the back of my roof, I hold the shift key down and then push down my wheel button and orbit the model around so I can continue. I'm still inside the fascia command. I continue. I click the next roof edge and the next and the next. Now I'm done. Now when you're creating your fascias, make one for each roof. I could continue to make fascia on these lower roofs, continuing on sort of within the same command. You're better off to not do that. So once you've put your fascia on here, and if you want to continue putting new fascia on roofs in different locations, click the Restart Fascia button. Now here's why. I'm not doing that. I'm picking these other fascia now, and that's it. So I've got two fascia that I created at once. Here's what happens. See how they're all selected? Revit considers it to be one fascia object. So if you delete this one roof because you're doing some renovations, okay, that's good that happened. If you accidentally delete this one fascia down here because you're not really thinking, you're zoomed in and you delete it, well, you just deleted the one upstairs as well. Right, so don't do that. So what I'm saying is, when you make your fascia for one roof, stop, and then carry on with the Restart Fascia button and then carry on. Okay, once you've got the gutters or the fascia in place, the gutters go next. Gutters can only be placed on flat roof edges. You cannot put a gutter on a sloping edge. You'll see it, Revit will not allow you to do it. So zoom in so you can pick the outer edge of your fascia and put your gutters on. So again, I'm going to work on the next story down. Actually, here I can put the gutter on the front. And if you do an upsy-daisy, if you click on the same edge where you've put a gutter or a fascia, Revit adds or removes that gutter or fascia. So if I accidentally pick the inside edge of my fascia, or if I pick the bottom edge of my fascia, you can see the gutters hanging off the bottom. Obviously that's not right. Just click in the same place again and you can remove that gutter. So once you've got your gutters on one level, restart it, and then you can go ahead and put the gutters on the lower levels. Again, pick the outer edge of your fascia, work your way around. You can see Revit does nice little miters. So there's my gutters wrapping around. With your fascia and your gutters, after you've finished, hit escape twice, and you can select your fascias and gutters, and there's little drag dots so that you can control the lengths of these things, or run them past each other, or have some control over how your gutters and fascias meet at the corner. And if for whatever reason those dots here don't line up, drag them back together again, and then once they meet, Revit will miter them. Now, for those of you who are interested in creating different sizes of fascia, I'm just going to point you to this quickly. Your fascia, the size of the fascia, is based on a profile family. So when you go into the type properties of your fascia, the size and shape of your fascia is based on a profile. So here it says fascia flat 1x12. If you want to get into changing this, go down into your families, go into profiles, and there's fascia flat right there. So you can go in, so there's no 2x12s here, right? Or even a 2x10. So if you need to make a 2x10 fascia, go down to your profiles folder, right click on one of them, and make a new size. So here's 2x10. Now, profiles on their own don't do anything. They're kind of an underpinning element in Revit that sort of defines sizes and shapes of things. So profiles on their own, it's not a 3D object. It defines the shape of a 3D object. So once you have made a modified profile size here, like this 2x10, I've got to go back into my fascia styles. So I've got to go back now and click on the fascia and edit it. So here I've got a 1x12 fascia, which nobody uses. So I'm going to rename it 2x10. Now that I've called the fascia a 2x10, I can now point it to that 2x10 profile I made a few moments ago. There it is there. So now you can see I've got 1.5 inch wide fascia instead of that 3/4 inch as I was showing earlier. Okay, I'm going to turn it back over to Henry here. He's going to do the floors and ceilings and walk you folks through that. Any questions?
If your barge board extends farther than your fascia though?
Yeah, then same thing. You can drag that dot downwards here. So there's the drag dot for the,
Okay.
so you can just pull that out. Yep, there you go.